Ron's grip tightened around the steering wheel as he steered his car back toward Steve's soul food. The streets were quieter now, the echoes of laughter and the hustle of the evening giving way to the stillness of the night. But the quiet only amplified the noise in Ron's head, a cacophony of past conversations, harsh words, and hurt feelings, all culminating into a dangerous resolve. The lights of the restaurant came into view, glowing like a beacon in the dark, drawing him in. His heart pounded in rhythm with the throbbing beat of the song on the radio, a dark melody that seemed to mirror his current state of mind. A surge of anger washed over him as he parked his car across the street. His eyes were fixed on the entrance of Steve's soul food, anticipation and rage pulsating through his veins. He could still see the patrons inside, some of them, his colleagues, oblivious to the storm brewing outside. His hand instinctively reached for the trunk, the cold touch of the rifle bringing a grim smile on his face. He could imagine Troy's surprise, his shock, his fear, and that thought alone seemed to ignite a wicked sense of satisfaction within him. He sat there, in his car, staring at the restaurant, the loaded rifle on the seat beside him. Each passing minute, each ticking second was like a string being pulled tighter, the tension building, threatening to snap. His gaze hardened, a testament to the darkness that had enveloped him, an ominous sign of what was to come. The stillness of the night was suddenly broken by the sound of his phone ringing. Ron looked at the screen, seeing his wife's name flashing. He silenced the call, his mind set, his resolve unshaken. And then he stepped out of the car, the lights of Steve's soul food reflecting in his eyes, showcasing not only the determination, but also the darkness that had taken root in him. The night was about to witness a confrontation, one that carried the weight of betrayal, resentment, and now a loaded rifle. With the rifle weighing heavy in his hands, Ron moved with a determined stride towards the restaurant. His heartbeat echoed in his ears like the ominous drumming of war. His eyes, hard as flint, were locked onto the figure standing a few paces from the restaurant, immersed in a call. It was Troy. His approach was quiet, almost predatory, and it wasn't until he was a few feet away that Troy finally noticed him. The words froze on Troy's lips as his eyes landed on Ron, and more importantly, on the rifle in his hands. The color drained from his face, his phone slipping from his grip and clattering onto the pavement. "Ron, what the hell?" Troy stammered, his eyes wide with shock and fear. He slowly raised his hands, a universal sign of surrender, his mind racing to make sense of the terrifying scene unfolding before him. The dimly lit street painted a surreal picture, an eerie silence punctuated by the distant hum of the city. Under the glow of the restaurant's neon sign, the two friends stood facing each other, their past camaraderie now replaced by fear and anger. "Ron, put the gun down," Troy urged, his voice trembling. Ron's only response was a cold, hollow laugh. His grip tightened around the rifle, the metal cool and unwavering, just like his resolve. His gaze bore into Troy, reflecting an intensity of emotions that went beyond mere words. For a moment, all that existed was the two of them, the tension tangible in the air, their lives precariously hanging in the balance. Ron's inner turmoil had taken a tangible form, a deadly weapon pointed at his friend, an ominous symbol of the ruin that their friendship had become. The confrontation had taken a chilling turn, one that held the promise of irrevocable consequences. The echo of a gunshot ripped through the night, the sound loud and jarring. The world slowed down for Troy as he registered the sharp pain piercing through him. His knees buckled, and he crumbled to the ground, the asphalt scraping his skin as he fell. Ron stood over him, his face an unreadable mask, the rifle still smoking in his hands. A second shot rang out, and then a third. Troy's body jerked with each impact, his eyes filled with disbelief and shock. The piercing sounds cut through the quiet night, and it felt like the world had taken a pause. holding its breath as Troy's lifeblood seeped out onto the pavement. A collective gasp arose from the few bystanders who had come out of the restaurant, drawn by the initial gunshot. Their faces were pale in the dim light, horror etched in their wide eyes as they watched the brutal scene unfold. "No!" a woman screamed, her voice high and shrill, shattering the eerie silence that had fallen. Others were rooted to their spots, frozen in their shock and fear. Some had their hands over their mouths, their eyes wide and filled with disbelief. A man turned away, unable to watch, his body convulsing with silent sobs. Another round of shots echoed, the harsh sound ricocheting off the walls. Ron's face was hard, his eyes void of any emotion. The rifle, still directed at Troy, seemed to be an extension of his rage, his need for revenge. When the last echo of the gunshots faded, replaced by the horrified whispers and panicked cries of the onlookers, Ron lowered his weapon. He stood over Troy's lifeless form, his expression one of grim satisfaction. The silent street was now a scene of horror, the echoes of their shattered friendship resonating in the air around them. It was a chilling end to a heated confrontation, the night forever scarred by the sound of gunfire and a friendship stained with blood. Picture this. The shopping center was bustling with activity as the old woman sat in her car, waiting patiently. She was listening to music on her phone, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel in time with the beat. Suddenly, the young woman from Facebook emerged from the shopping center, her arms laden with bags. She was walking towards the car when she heard a noise behind her. She stopped and turned, her eyes scanning the parking lot. But there was nothing there. Just the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the distant hum of traffic. The young woman shrugged and continued on her way, unaware of the danger that lurked in the shadows. The old woman in the car watched in horror as Ron approached the young woman, who was her daughter. She tried to warn her, but it was too late. There was a loud bang, and the young woman crumpled to the ground. The old woman went into shock as she watched her daughter lying there, motionless. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Her worst fears had been realized, and she was overwhelmed with grief and despair. Ron stood there, the gun still smoking in his hand. He had never meant for things to turn out this way, but he couldn't take back what he had done. He was filled with regret and remorse as he realized the full extent of the damage he had caused. As the old woman sat there, numb with shock, she couldn't help but wonder what had led Ron down this dark path. How had it come to this? And what was she going to do now that her daughter was gone?